In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi, I'm Glenn the Geeky Hippie. Welcome to WoT the Adaptation. We're the YouTube show that reviews adaptations for you from one format to another. This week, we're continuing with our coverage of The Expanse, but I've got a special guest tonight, Jim. How you doing tonight, Jim? Tell everybody who you are.
I am doing fantastic, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you. I'm
No
Jim
problem.
from Fantasy for the Ages, the father and son show that talks about fantasy and sci-fi and whatever other nerdiness we feel like talking about. We do a lot of stuff with Wheel of Time, and then plenty of other things, including The Expanse. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. It's been a while coming, so we're talking about episode 202, Doors and Corners, written by James S.A. Corey, also known as Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, directed by Breck Eisner, and it first aired on February 1st of 2017 on the Sci-Fi Channel, the original home of The Expanse. What'd you think of this episode?
I enjoyed the episode. There's a lot to like in this episode.
Yeah.
I just honestly rewatched it earlier today, just to have it as fresh as possible. And
Twice.
It made me think, man, I got to rewatch all these episodes again because they're so good.
Yeah,
That was my thought.
I actually just back in January finished a binge read of the entire series. Well, the latter 4 books of the series. I'd read the rest before.
Okay.
The beginning of the year. But also started a rewatch starting with season 2 because I'd watched season 1 100 times last year. I started with season 2 and plowed through at the same time as I was reading the books, and it just that was a heck of an experience. And the last 2 books were an emotional experience. You know, I wasn't prepared for that, but I'm glad I read them. I hope that we get to see those stories told on screen somewhere.
We
kind of
deserve it.
When I hear that Naren Shankar said they were doing a pause, is the term I heard used.
We had hope. We have hope.
Yeah. Well, they have to age up a little bit, so. I like this episode. Yeah. I watched it twice today, twice yesterday, and once Friday. That's just how I do reviews. I watch it a whole bunch and listen.
Absorb it all.
Yeah. And listen to those parts of the audiobook over and over, back and forth. I'll listen to one, then watch, then listen, then watch.
Okay.
Which is what I've been doing all day. At this point in the show, I think this might be the best episode. I think. And it's definitely the best written. I'll say that much. I think these authors really know the characters and the story they're telling.
Sure.
You know, I would hope they do, at least. You know, if they don't, then I don't know what they were doing all that time. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a perfect episode. It's hard to nail a perfect episode, but it has far more good than the few tiny little flaws.
I don't know that this show, I can't think of any perfect episodes on this show offhand. As we go forward again watching, I'll see if I can spot one, but I can't think of a perfect episode. Not many shows ever pull that off.
Right. It's hard.
The Wire pulled off 5 seasons of them, though. That's my favorite television show of all time.
All right.
So, let me find our first question. I can edit it. If there were any changes to the source materials, which there were, did they affect how you enjoyed the show, the episode? And if so, what were they and how?
You know, there are some subtle adaptation changes in this, but the overall story they're still telling is the right story. So it's not epically shifting for me. You know, I think what what kind of comes out for me here is there's the different role that they place Avasarala in over compared to the books is an
Right.
ongoing issue. It's not just this episode, it's an ongoing thing. They did it for a reason and they use it well in the adaptation, but I still like the book version better. So that's there. And that might just be me. Now, it doesn't change how much I enjoy that character, and the actress knocks it out of the park. She is incredible. So
She
I'm on record
automatically
with that. Man.
One of the rules we've got here is when discussing best actors in an episode of The Expanse, if Shohreh Aghdashloo was in the episode, she's an automatic gimme. She's
there.
already considered. We don't need to mention it, just to end the obvious, Shohreh. You know,
there you go.
Every episode.
The other thing that I have an issue with slightly, that's also an ongoing thing, it's not new with this episode, is just Fred Johnson. I don't like what the show did with Fred Johnson compared to the book.
Really?
And maybe that's just me, but I preferred book version Fred Johnson. So every time I see Fred on the TV show, I'm just going, okay, I'll work with it.
Coleman
Nothing against the actor. He does fine. It's just I don't like the way they adapted Fred for the show.
The way they wrote him.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I really like Coleman in the role. He was actually the reason that the show even came to my attention in the first place. When I read about him leaving The Walking Dead and saw that he was leaving to go have a recurring role on The Expanse, I'm like, what's this?
I never put that connection together. I mean, I knew he was on The Walking Dead, and I watched all 11 seasons of that, but I never put that connection together. Oh, dang it.
He left to come do this. And so that got me interested in the show, and because he was one of my favorite actors while he was on The Walking Dead. And I don't know, I watched the show long before I ever read the books. I'd watched the entire series before I read the books.
See, I'm the exact opposite.
Right. It's only recently that I read Beyond Leviathan Wakes, which I've read now probably 4 times. I'm on like my 5th, 6th, depending on whether you want to count me listening to 4 or 5 chapters at a time, twice a day.
It works for me.
Or twice.
Works for me.
You know,
I'll give
and
you
then
double.
doing the next 4. Yeah. So I'll be at 5 or 6 by the time we finish Leviathan Wakes in this storyline.
Sure.
I
think that does make a difference, though. You know, if you're a listener first, you know, if you watch
it,
if you watch the show first and then you go to the literature content, or if you're the other way around, it does impact how you view an adaptation.
Definitely, it does. Some of the stuff that I read before, I ended not liking the adaptation nearly as much, but other times, stuff that I read after watching the show, I find I like the show better. Except for season 2 of The Witcher. That was just an abomination. Season 2 of The Witcher just was not right.
Now that's one where I watched the show first. Then I went back and read the books.
Well,
and I've enjoyed the books. Here. Yeah.
Same here. I read the books after having seen season 2. But no, I like what they're doing with Fred. I like I like Fred. He's one of my favorite characters on the show at this point. Or actually, overall, I'd say my favorite characters are Alex Kamal, Bobby Draper, Fred Johnson, and Monica Stewart. Except for Alex, on Bobby, I've got 2 minor characters.
Interesting.
I like Monica, especially played by, and I can't think of her name. It'll be right here. She's great as Monica, I think. Okay. Monica is one of the few people that, this is all spoilers, but I'll mark that. One of the few people that could put Holden in his place verbally. She did it at least once. So kind of like that. Holden needs that more often. Changes to this.
Interesting.
Changes to this one. I like Book Dresden a lot more than this Dresden.
Okay.
I think Dresden in the book actually almost gets you to start thinking maybe he has a point, but I mean, he doesn't. Like it's Holden there in the book. He's like, there's something wrong with the argument, but he can't quite figure out what it is, and it's, but I think they did a better job with Dresden in the book than on
In the
show.
book, he's a little more professional, but also a little more oily in the way he's laying it out. I see it.
But
yeah.
Also a really dapper looking guy too. That's the way it's, plays into the whole trope in literature of ugly is bad. It's supposed to be bad, and good looking is supposed to be good. It's going to try to trick you into thinking this guy's got a point, especially because I believe he was wearing all in white too. I know it was linen at least, so that's not necessarily always white, but I liked all the added stuff. I'm having fun with what they're doing with Avasarala and the War Room. I'm enjoying that, and Admiral Souther, because I kind of like Admiral Souther. He's one of the few military officers that in the show that really deserves respect throughout.
Has integrity.
Throughout their
yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I like those war room scenes and all that. So next, how do you think the show adapted such things as the costumes and all that, the visual side of it? To me, so far, go ahead.
Well, you go ahead. Go ahead first.
I with the CG at least, which is part of this, I think this is probably the best CG of the entire season. Actually, maybe the best of the show so far. This is the episode they put their money into, because this was a great scene. Some great CG during the battle taken in the station, especially that shot of the stealth ship coming up from behind. It just behind the ring station. It made me think of a shark coming out of the water. Just the way it just comes out of the darkness. It was just like that. It just very predatory feeling, that shot.
When the bolts are flying through the Rocinante and you see these holes just perfectly lining up, ripping through, and it's done really well. This was a question that when I looked at the things we're going to talk about today, I thought about it, and all I could come up with is they did an awesome job. There is no part of this scenery, costumes, props, music, CGI where I get taken out of the story. It's just so smooth and polished, and even if some of these things are maybe different than the book, when I watch it on TV, I don't care because it's so well done.
Everything is completely believable. Yeah, all of it's very believable. Just the sets. I am so convinced that the sets for the Rocinante must all be literally connected and stacked as they're supposed to be in the show, just because it seems like such a real location. They build it
amazing.
I don't know how big and how real, in the way it's structured it is in real life on set, but I want to picture it like they did with Serenity on Firefly, where Serenity was actually a built set. You were literally filming down here, and then if you're going, you had to go up the stairs because everything upstairs was literally up the ladders.
There you go.
So if they had it built, I'd love to get the designs, the blueprints for the Rocinante, because if I was ever a multimillionaire, I'd have one built in my backyard next to my Millennium Falcon and my 2 replicas of Bag End. I'd have a Hobbit-sized and a people-sized replicas of Bag End. Those would actually be out in front of the house.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, this one is one of the better. Sci-Fi Channel isn't necessarily known for having the greatest special effects.
They cut corners. I watched all those cheesy shows anyways, back in the day. I was so thankful there was a channel like the Sci-Fi Channel.
It still blows my mind, though, that Battlestar Galactica CG still holds up, and that was from 2004.
That show was ahead of its time already. Yeah. Now, it was making up for a lot after the original one.
Oh,
which I
yes.
watched in
tried.
its entirety as a child. I watched that
I
show.
did too. I tried rewatching it a while
Oh,
back.
it's
and I
painful.
couldn't.
You can't rewatch
It
it.
was
I
no,
tried
don't
to.
even attempt. I just strongly people not to attempt to watch it. Did you pay attention to the end credits of this episode?
I did
Did
not.
you hear?
What did I miss?
No music. It's the noise from Eros. You're hearing the sounds. That's the only thing I can
Oh,
figure out
man.
that it is. And it's chilling and creepy, and your flesh just crawls, and you're just like, 10 seconds is long enough. I
can
can't
tell. I've not watched it because I went to watch the remake, and it was not remake, to rewatch again today.
Yeah.
And I go to start the episode, and it's right where I left off the last time I watched it, which was the beginning of the credits. So I jumped back to the beginning and watched, and stopped at the beginning of the credits again. So I've never seen that. I will have to go catch that now.
So we talk about the CG and the physical, visible aspects. What would you say about the writing of this episode? And do you think the actors delivered the script well?
As far as I could see, yes. I thought the writing was solid. The acting was done well. A couple that stand out for me in the delivery of their lines. Amos, anytime Amos Burton is on the screen, he steals the scene for me.
Okay.
Well, and that's
You and
why he's in
Max
my
would really get
background.
along.
Okay. He's got that delivery. And when, again, I read the books first. So when I first saw Wes Chatham as Amos Burton, I went, that's not Amos. That's not what I pictured. And it only took like a couple episodes that I'm like, oh no, screw that. That's
Right.
Amos. That's it. That's right. He owns this role. So he's not prominent in episode 2. It's,
Not at all.
he's got the little bit early, and then during the battle scene, he's involved trying to fix that thing, and he should have 15 dozen broken bones in his body, but it's,
God, yeah.
it's fantasy. Okay.
Right.
But he just delivers his lines really well. He's solid and consistent. But one that shines a little better in this episode for me is Miller. Because there's times in season 1 where Miller bores me to death. It's just sometimes a little too slow the way it's written. It's not the actor's fault necessarily. It's just, and none of that in this episode. I like Miller in this episode. He delivers, and of course, right near the end, he really delivers. But we can probably talk about that later.
Yeah, he delivers 3 nice little pieces of metal. I think this is probably, again, at this point in the show, it's the best episode written. They just, even not looking at it as an adaptation, just as a writing on its own, I think it's really solid. It's really solid, and it delivers on a whole lot of different things. It's not just action. There's a lot of, that whole scene at the end is one big old philosophical discussion. It's like,
yes,
so I think this one, and like I said earlier, the writers really know this story, and I think that's part of why they were picked for this episode.
Well, the war room scene early on, that there's a lot in the words that are said there. There's so much packed in there. And when on a rewatch, you get much more of what's happening now than what you see the first time. But there's some smart choices in the way different characters say different things and the way they say it. It's loaded.
See, I can't remember why, if it's something we see later on, but I'm trying to figure out what's going through Christian Avasarala's mind when she's got that smile on her face looking at Aaron right just before she sends him, the whole idea about blowing up Deimos. What is she thinking? I have no idea what's going on in that devious, beautiful mind of hers. It kind of scares me for Aaron Wright's sake, but then I remember last episode how entrenched he is with, Jules Pierre Mao, and he's nothing but Mao's lapdog, and I really don't like that character, and I think a lot of it is the actor doing such a good job at playing it.
Gets us to hate him really well. Yeah.
And he does the same on Star Trek Discovery. He does a really good job of getting you to hate him until one episode when they get you to love him. So sympathize with him. I don't know if you watch Discovery.
I do. It's a real gift to make a character who can be incredibly believable and you despise him. You know, because it's easy to make a cheap, fake, nasty villain. I mean, those are a dime a dozen.
And there's
to
no
make one
mustache
that's
for him.
really interesting, it has depth, and you get the motivations, and then just hate the person. That's good acting. That's not easy to do.
Yes, definitely. Is there a scene or sequence that you most remember and one that you most enjoy?
There's two of them for me, for two different reasons. The one that I enjoy the most is the scene with Diego and Miller when they're in the drop thing, and Diego can't shut up, and then Miller's up chucking, and just this interchange between the two of them. That scene's delightful. I just
that scene was. It's probably the easiest of Diago's scenes to watch. I'll be bringing him up later when we get to specific actors.
Okay. Okay.
For me, my favorite scene that I absolutely love, and I'll watch it again, is the bar scene with Christian Avasarala and Admiral Souther.
Okay.
And
yeah,
especially when he tells her she's the most horrible person he's ever met. And I'm like, I fully understand why he says that, because Avasarala really is a bad person in many ways.
And she primes the pump there. It's great. Yeah. She, gets him started, and then he just goes. She expects
but she
that
always has a reason why she's being so horrible. In her mind, this ties into one of the themes. In her mind, her reasons make her justified in taking the actions she takes. From the very first scene we ever saw her in with the belter on the hooks, the gravity torture. And she sat there watching him, and just like that. And I was like, she's pulled a bunch of stuff, both in the books and on the show.
Yep.
So I really love the space battle.
Sure.
Not the best space battle we've had on the show yet. One of the better space battles I think the show ever had. Because there were some really good ones.
Oh yeah. We have to talk about the scene with Miller taking out Dresden, though. That's iconic.
Yes.
To this show.
That was my next line here.
Yeah, it's a series changing moment right there. Both in the book and the adaptation, because the same thing happens. It's right there. Wow.
It just that scene. He had to kill. He had to kill Dresden. I don't. The argument he makes in the book, his reasoning in the book is a lot better. When he's like, he's gonna get off if I didn't. He's gonna convince prosecutors or judges or juries that he was right in what he did. And
he sees with the clarity of someone who's done his career working in this field in the police force or whatever they want to call it. I believe
in the books he also had that treatment, that same treatment that the other scientists had. Because if you read the novella, then it's in the novella.
I have read the short, but I don't remember that he had it.
Yep, he says I've had it done before Cortazar goes through with it. He was,
but Miller sees it. Honestly, it would have been better if we'd already killed him by accident as we were just taking things out. It would have been better.
Yeah.
Since that didn't happen, this is our one shot to stop everything going horribly in the future. Because the moment politicians get a hold of this, it's just going to continue on. And so much horror is going to happen. And he knows to take this shot now, he's going to pay a price for that. He knows. Doesn't matter.
like
It's the right thing to do.
Like in the book, when right after he shoots him in the book, Holden says, Miller, yeah, he knew what was coming. That was the line. Miller knew what was coming. Yeah, to find your own ride home, which is like, ouch.
They lean into that a little bit here in the show.
Yeah,
because before he goes to head down on the drop thing, Miller says, or not Miller, Holden says, yeah, don't clean out your room. It'll be here afterwards. And well, no, it won't.
Yeah, it's a very it's a parallel to in the book. The way they did it, it was, where do you want or Holden asking Miller, so where should we meet up at when we're done, when this is done? And Miller's like, I don't know what you mean. And Holden's like, want to keep the whole crew together. Things I don't trust Johnson. Things might go bad. I want to keep the whole crew together. And I'm like,
Miller finally belonged to something.
Yeah,
and he has to let go of that to do the right thing here.
Yeah, and in the book,
it just elevates his character. Miller is not a good character for most of the book and show. He's not. He's kind of,
when he's alive, he's not a good character.
He's not a good character, but he does something really good.
Yes.
And so characters who don't have a lot of intrinsic value can still be heroes.
Yeah. The characters can be on the good guy's side and not be a good person. Yeah, because you can't say he's not on the good guy's side, at least from the POV of the show. And like you said, he's not a good person.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't even really get a redemption arc. He's just who he is. And then he does a couple of good things. And then we get to see him later in a different way, which is...
Yeah. I do think he gets a redemption, with the whole thing that comes later when, after
we don't want to spoil things,
somewhere.
I understand it
right.
here, so we can't say too much. But
well, I do put up a spoiler countdown if I do give a spoiler, and then I have a board on the screen the entire time the spoiler is being talked about. So
yeah, but
we just
part of
what
motivates him to be better than he used to be is that he's not redeemable. That's how he looks at himself. I'm just really not worth that much. So if someone's got to make a sacrifice, take the hit, it might as well be me.
And he's been a sad case since the first moment he was on screen or on page.
Right.
It was just, this guy is such a sad sack. Equal parts dislike him for it and equal parts feel bad for him. Because, he's just at the end of his rope in so many different ways at this point. So that brings me to my favorite actor of the episode. And I usually give 3, but I'll give 1 and then see who you've got.
Okay.
But Thomas Jane as Miller, he's got this... I've seen Thomas Jane in one other thing, and he wasn't like this, didn't have these mannerisms. So it's an entirely Miller thing. But just the way Miller moves, and his hand, his just the mannerisms and all these little quirks, with his hair and all that.
Yeah.
Just so much detailed thought into every little movement he makes. And I think his performance, the delivery of the lines is great. So I always usually put him up at the top of my list. Who would you say?
Well, we already talked about Show-Ray, of course. She just nails it every time. But again, and I kind of hinted at this before, Wes Chatham. His Amos Burton is just delivered so well that he personifies this character just the way I want to see it now. And he did a great job in this one. And particularly that scene, it's a simple scene. It's the one on my screen. They're at the bar. They're just talking. And then he disappears. He pays someone to listen to Alex. And it was so classic. I loved it.
Even despite hearing stuff like Amos in the book, Amos flying for 25 years. Obviously, that doesn't work with Wes Chatham, as this version of Amos can't be flying for 25 years. He's not old enough.
He aged really well.
He's still through the entire reading of the books, my headcanon for Amos. I have a hard time picturing the middle-aged, tall, really tall, heavyset guy. Yeah. Most of these actors are my headcanon.
He personifies the oddity of the way Amos mentally addresses the world. He doesn't look at the world like a typical person. And the one short story, The Churn, really helps us understand that about Amos's background. But he really got it into the acting. You can see it that his filter's different. He's not viewing things. He's not interacting the same way you and I would do. And he's so consistent with that all the way through.
From what Rebecca brought up one time last year when we were doing season 1, apparently Ty Frank wasn't happy with the casting of Wes Chatham until they saw
that he was won
him
over
on set. Until he saw him on set or in like a finished episode, and he was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense."
Yeah, I think it's that he gets this character. He understands the written Amos, is able to translate it to the performance.
You know what the character's nickname was on set, don't you? The crew started calling the character Murder Snuggles. Wes Chatham's version of Amos was Murder Snuggles.
I like that.
I just think that's so TV show Amos Burton, especially when you see. Well, we won't go there with that character yet. So
we talked about best. Worst. Is for me again. Worst is one that it's not against the actor. It just doesn't work for me. We're back to Chad Coleman again. I never have been able to see him as the Fred Johnson I want. So it doesn't matter how he does the performance. It doesn't work for me.
See,
it's subjective.
He was my second name that I had for best.
See,
My third name is our introduction of Kara G as Kamina Drummer. Well, Kamina Drummer / Michio Pa.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue that maybe I'll be on for an episode where we could talk about that.
Oh, okay, I'll make sure. To arrange that.
But I do like her in this particular episode. That's true.
Yeah,
I agree.
I like her in a lot of episodes. I became a fan of her after a while. I hated her at first, but she grew on me, and now when I watch it, I'm like, she's so great in this part. I don't often have a negative. And when I do, I never look up the name of the actor, or if I know the name, I never say the name of the actor. I'll just say the name of the character.
Okay.
But Diagu, this episode, that scene, there's one scene in particular that really just, one line, it's like people scratching a chalkboard or squeaking styrofoam.
Gotta hear. All right, what is it?
Invincible Me. After he gets up being hit in the face with the gel round, just his delivery of Invincible Me was just like, in a typical
show, then he would be shot with a real round. That's what would have happened next. So I get you. Well,
yeah. I normally don't have a problem with Diagu, however you pronounce it. I'm trying to pronounce it more like Jefferson Mays pronounces it because I assume he looked it up. And the audiobooks,
it's a weird name.
It's hard to,
yeah.
If you haven't done the audiobooks and you feel like doing a reread at any time, Jefferson Mays' narration of the audiobooks is just great. Okay. I love his narration. Then we get to the more fun part of the discussion. What were the themes that you saw from both the book, the show, or separately? Stuff that you saw dealt with, stuff that you saw ignored.
There's a huge theme that applies to the Expanse as a whole many, many times, but is very prevalent in 2 different scenes of this episode. And that's that the ends do not justify the means.
It's the big one I got here.
Massive in this episode. Yeah. So certainly we see it when Miller takes out Dresden. That's the whole point. It's like, no, okay?
Right.
But in the War Council early on too. That's a big thing of what's behind all of this. The ends don't justify the means. So
there's a lot of it. I mean, you also got Dresden's arguments about why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, that is clearly just all about the ends justifying, not justifying the means. You know,
that argument he makes. Don't let the lives of all these people that are gone now, are dead. Don't let it be wasted. Let me finish my research.
It's like, yeah. Ava Sorella committing treason to prevent a war. That one seems like it's worth the you know, what she did, you know, by contacting Fred Johnson. That's technically treason.
But you know, there is a difference. There's a difference. And here's the key difference that's on display there for me.
Yeah.
When someone is willing to do something where if it goes badly, it's all on them. They're the one taking the risk.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And that's what Ava Sorella is doing. If she gets caught, she's in jail, man. She's executed. She's done. As opposed to the risk of what you're deciding to do is all on someone else. All those people die because we need it. It's worth, you know, the ends justify this. Okay, no, that's the bad kind. Definitely. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I totally agree. That is the big difference between the two is who gets hurt, you know?
Yeah.
Who gets hurt and affected by the means. If it's yourself, then it's not really as bad. You know, it might be worth what you do.
Yeah. Do you
have
another,
some other examples? Well, I have more things. Some examples. Sadovir, Ehrenreich, working with or for Jules Pierre Mao. You know, just to get weapons for Earth. You know, put them. You know, get weapons projects out of this. You know, he's doing his best to help foment war.
Right.
You know, and his puppet. I don't know. It hasn't been revealed yet that that's his puppet, but Admiral Wen. Yeah, Admiral Wen.
Which we really don't like. We don't like that guy. He's just such a putz, man. They've got him that way right from the beginning.
I see him, and in my head, the picture I have is this very cartoonish officer who is like pompous, like a peacock. And there's a word for it, and I can't think of it. There was a general who was named after, who was like this, and I didn't look it up. I didn't have time because I was busy. But it just,
he's almost a caricature of this type of military leader.
Yeah, and it's just he's totally a hawk. I mean, if ever I've seen a hawk on a show, he is by far a hawk. And in the book, this doesn't come up because they got rid of the character on the show after season 1, but in the book, Havelock is telling when he's communicating with Miller in one of the Miller chapters, he's having to make friends with these monsters that he works with just to survive, you know, and he's excused because of who gets hurt, but that is a case of where you have to ask, do the ends justify the means? To survive and keep this job, does being nice to these guys, you know, are psychopaths, you know, just it's whether or not that's worth it to him. I had one that kind of is related. The difference between justice or vengeance and what people deserve, you know. Justice needed to be served, but Miller sees what he did as serving justice.
100%.
Holden sees it as vengeance. And Holden in the book was kind of thinking maybe not so much to shoot the guy, but he really hated everybody in there and he wanted bad things to happen to them. But he still would want to go through the courts, I would assume.
Yeah.
But
there's a right way and a wrong way. That was the wrong way. Yeah, that's Holden.
The Belters went in wanting to wreck some shit. Pardon my French. You know, they wanted to kill, and that's what the Belters, including Miller, were there for. You know, and that's because. And so the question is what happened there? You know, and I don't even know which side at this point really that on the show. I can't remember what Fred Johnson's feelings are about what Miller just did. I mean, in the scene, he's looking pretty shocked and surprised, but when he thinks about it, I don't remember what he ends up, you know, because he ends up letting Miller stay there for a while, if I remember correctly. But
I think he's still. My recollection is he's still pretty upset about it. You know, that you had no authority to do that. You went over the line. You shouldn't have. We could have used that guy. Yeah.
Did you have another theme that you wanted to bring up?
I do have one. It has to do with the OPA and simply the theme of we need to stand together or we're going to die alone. That comes out in particular in that scene where where Johnson is trying to recruit the people to go on the mission. And then he's got that one OPA dude who steps up, you know, and it's none of this stuff. We need to just do our thing and strikes, you know, and then of course he puts him out at the airlock. But but the point being, we can't have these squabbles. We can't. All these individual little strikes and stuff, that's not what's going to do it. We need to be united and we need to be a force, or otherwise we're going to be nothing. And that theme, it wasn't huge in this episode, but it was there, and it's going to continue to be there in ways.
And that sequence there also goes into the one we were just talking about. Do the ends justify the means? You know,
true. Yeah.
When he threw Fred, you know, when Fred threw that guy out the airlock, I mean,
that was murder.
It didn't bother me.
Murder.
Yeah. It was murder. Didn't really bother me though, because you know this is a terrorist, one of the terrorist goons of the OPA.
Really? Yeah.
You know, and I'm an earther through and through, and you know, the latter couple seasons made me really bitter towards aspects of the OPA. Well, a certain aspect of the OPA. So. Some of the OPA guys I like, you know, I really like Fred Johnson, obviously. And I kind of like Anderson Dawes, you know.
Until I don't.
Yeah.
Early Anderson Dawes, yes. Later Anderson Dawes,
Season 1 Anderson Dawes is the best.
Absolutely.
And, you know, but the actor also knocks it out of the park. I mean, Jared Harris.
I love that actor in everything I've seen.
How did they get Jared Harris for this show? I don't know. That was like.
Have you watched Foundation?
Yes.
I mean, there he is again.
Yeah, I watched season 1. I don't know if the season 2's been
That's all that's out so far. Just season 1.
Okay.
Season 2's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised when I saw that it was Harry Sullivan, and I was just like, duh. I mean, if I thought about it, I probably would have cast him as Harry Sullivan if I'd thought about it. But because I like to play the casting game. I have a lot of fun with fan casting for all kinds of stuff.
We do agree. Show Ray is Cad Swain.
Yes, Hot Swain.
Okay, you're on that. Yes, very good.
Yes, Hot Swain.
As soon as I saw that on Twitter way back now, I was like,
yes.
And then when she gets involved on Twitter,
I was freaking out.
Yeah,
I was
read these posts.
I was reading it on Twitter as it was happening, and I was just like, can't believe it's just show Agnes
next level, man.
This show really launched her career. I mean, she had a career.
Oh, I was a fan way back when she was on 24. Did you watch 24?
Okay, no, I only watched the first season, I think.
Well, she was on, I think, the second season.
Okay,
she was incredible.
I don't remember her.
Much younger back then, but she's. You should
this
watch
was
it.
The first thing I'd seen her.
But she was right there. I fell in love with this actress. She nails her role so well, and I've enjoyed her in a number of things since then. This
is the first thing I've seen her in. I think I've seen her like doing guest spots on shows my parents are watching when I go through the living room. You know, one time I saw her on some show. But she wasn't known. I mean, there were people who knew her, but she wasn't like well known in TV fandom, let alone genre. fandom, and when you get when you get known in genre, you're made for the rest of your life, because she's going to have all the science fiction and fantasy shows and movies she wants to do offered to her, you know, at this point now.
Now, actors and actresses, they hear that, they know that's true, and they're all also always trying to avoid the Spock syndrome. You know, to get pigeonholed in one character. She doesn't have to worry about that. She's just, it's a versatile
Most
character.
of them manage
to other things.
Most of them nowadays, I think, manage to avoid the pigeonholing, but they do get into the whole, once on a sci-fi show, you're always going to have a spot on any sci-fi show. Like Mark Shepard, the actor Mark Shepard, he's on everything, you know.
Yeah.
That's why I say he needs to play Bilal. If we keep Bilal on the show, I think he'd be great as Bilal, just to have him in a spot, because I always joke, it's, you know, it's the law or something that he's in every genre show, you know, aired in America.
But that's a fair question. It doesn't look like we're going to get 13 Forsaken.
No.
So which ones got axed? We'll find out.
We'll find out. Two other themes that I picked up on. There was a sense of family and friendship, you know, especially with the, you know, the relationship developing between Holden and Miller up until Miller shot the guy. You know, that whole thing, you know, don't clear your bunk out, your quarters out. You know, that was tying into the way it went in the book, you know. And then the title, Doors and Corners. Look where you're going. I
love the title of the episode. That's such a Miller thing. The Doors and Corners.
And there's a board game. There's a board game, an Expanse board game called Doors and Corners.
I didn't know that. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't realize it until my second watching today that, you know, in a way that is a theme, because look where you go before you make your move. You know, the attack on the spin station, they didn't scout it out well enough to know where that, you know, to know where that stealth ship was. In the book, they didn't know that it was 2 stealth ships. Ava Sarala scouting out the truth on Fred Johnson, you know, when she's talking to Admiral Souther before she reaches out to him, because I think she was planning on reaching out to him before she talked to the Admiral. So it's a little bit there, you know, but, you know, Miller's right, you know, gotta look Doors and Corners, and
it's where they always get you. Doors and Corners.
Yeah, and that can apply to real life in a not a literal sense, you know, when you think about it, the idea of look where you're going, you know. So any other themes that you had?
No, those are the 2 that prominent stood for me, and the ones you added there, I like those 2. Absolutely.
Any further thoughts on this episode?
Nothing deep, you know. Again, just really enjoyed it. With any show like this, there are some episodes that they're good, and then there's some that are great. This was one of the greater ones. There's a lot that happens here that advances the story, that advances certain characters, that shifts the plot in significant ways. So this is a very worthy episode. And again, first time for me revisiting one of these in a while, and it made me want to watch more of them now. Okay, so that's a good episode. You know, instantly I just want to keep going, suck you right in. Good episode.
I could watch this one a few more times, you know, and I'm gonna be, because I'm gonna be taking clips out, because I always put clips of scenes.
Yep, right.
Now that I've learned how to do that, so I'm always putting clips in. Well, thank you, Jim, for coming on. It has been a delight chatting with you.
My pleasure.
Finally, looking forward to having you on again in a few weeks. I'm not sure what your next episode number is.
I think we've got, I don't have the number memorized, but it's just a few weeks. Yeah, it won't be too far out.
Just a few weeks. Hopefully we'll have a third person with us that night. We were unable to have everybody here tonight. Sorry, guys at home. But thanks for joining. Thanks, everybody at home, for watching. Please come back next week as we discuss episode 3. I don't have the title. I'll put it up there. And don't forget to be awesome.